Hey everybody, my name is Scott Wayman. I'm the founder and CEO of Kangaroo Time, and we are proud to present another webinar for you regarding the crisis of COVID-19. So for many of you that don't know, as a company, we decided a few months ago that our goal and our currency was about advocacy for early educators and the leaders in the early education world. We decided to focus on not growing the company anymore, but getting content to those that are helping us in this industry. So more than anything, helping you to address growing your business, caring for your employees, and serving the many families that we're all so fortunate to serve. In this time though, we humbly ask each of you, as you try to ready yourself for recovery and the new normal, to look at our products. We essentially help child care centers and early education entrepreneurs consolidate 3, 4, or 5 systems that they currently have running in their centers into one single source of truth. So a child care management system, so a replacement for the system that you're using for billing, so a staff management platform, so scheduling, payroll, we help with all that. A parent engagement platform, so that hardwired experience that your parents get, the ability to fill out enrollment forms, make their payments, communicate with your teachers, and then classroom automation, so the tools that your teachers use in the classroom, and all under one single source of truth. And as we all ready for the new normal, we all have to do the hard work and make tough decisions. We hope that we can be of assistance to you, not just with the content that you're about to see, but maybe the tools that you use in your day-to-day. So please enjoy the content, and please join our Facebook group. It's called KT Childcare Connect. It's a place where we can all come together, discuss the progress that each of us are making, what we're doing to address the new normal, and anything we can do to help enhance what we're doing for our families and optimize our businesses. Again, thank you for being here. We're so humbled to have you. Enjoy the content. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome. We have a record group of you guys today. Where's everybody coming from? We got Connecticut. Oh, Buffalo was the first one. Yeah, wow. Kim, your celebrity power it's amazing. Star power for sure. All right, so as everybody joins, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our largest, most highly attended webinar to date. These things just continue to grow. Guys and girls, we're gaining so much momentum here. Each of you have been so helpful in providing guidance as we go through this time. But one of the I think the most important thing is that we all have each other, and we're all looking for the best content to help each other lean on. One of the ways as a company that Kangaroo Time has decided to approach this is with our Facebook group. It's called KT Childcare Connect. We want each and every one of you to join. This is an area where Genevieve, myself, we try to post as much relevant content. We're also trying to post as much data as possible, so what we're seeing from our customers across the country and what the real situation is, so you guys can make educated decisions. So about us, Kangaroo Time, we are a software company, and a few weeks back we decided as a company the currency that we live in every day is about giving, and it's about advocacy for our customers. It was so much clearer, 8, 12 weeks ago when we make these beautiful products and our customers use them and they make our businesses better. But what that kind of evolved into was we needed to stop our relentless prioritization for growth and building the company, and more about transitioning that and putting the best and brightest minds at our company in a place to where they could provide content for all of you. So we really appreciate you guys being here. We're super humbled to have you here joining us. And if any of you need our products for now and the time being, we have a free product that we'd be happy to give you that will allow you to communicate with your families, your staff, and as you come back, it will help you with scheduling and load management and planning. So with that said, you know, the reason we're doing this is because we believe in our industry, and we believe that the thought leadership like Kim that we have on board today, we will find ways to help optimize what we're all doing to serve the families that we all love so much. So again, join KT Childcare Connect. Also, please, guys, this session will be on our YouTube channel. So if you miss any portion of this, you can go to our YouTube channel tomorrow and replay this. We get hundreds of thousands of hours of replays, and we want you guys sharing this content with your counterparts, people within the cohort. We encourage you to share it with your team. And also know that if you're in the KT Childcare Connect group, we'll be announcing our webinars. Right now, we're doing 2 webinars per week. We might dial that up depending on demand. We might slide that back and just focus on quality. But again, that's driven by what you guys want. So let us know on any topics that might be relevant. So certificates, a few housekeeping items. Certificates will be sent to you directly tomorrow. You will get a wrap-up email, and we'll have the link to the certificate in that email. You know, there are a bunch of you on this call. Please don't freak out if you don't see it by 7 a.m. in the morning. You will get it tomorrow. If you have any questions, we want to answer them. Put them in the Q&A. Click the QA button here, type your question out, and in real time, Genevieve and our team will be answering those that can be answered, and then we'll save some for Kim at the end. Your microphone and cameras are turned off. Again, this is being recorded. So about Kim, we are honored. I'm honored to have a former Buffalonian here. She serves as the Director of Early Childhood Programs for Seneca Babcock Community Association. She has more than a quarter of a century of experience working in the early childhood field. Does it make you feel older if I say quarter of a century or 25 years?
That you feel real old, yeah.
It gets real fast when you start talking about centuries as units of measurement. She spent much of her career specializing in trauma-informed care. So trauma-informed care. She also currently serves on the task force for COVID-19 response for Erie County in Western New York. Today's discussion, Kim Stewart serves as the Director of Early Childhood Development Programs for Seneca Babcock Communities. She will discuss the trauma impact during this pandemic and the ways you can support yourself, your team, your children, and your families, not only during this pandemic, but beyond. Kim, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, a very hot topic, as our record attendance shows. Take it away. I'm going to unshare my screen, and I'm going to disappear until the end. Thanks, Kim.
All right, thank you. All right. Let me get started. All right, so thank you so much for having me. Talking about trauma is one of those things I find to be so important, not only because of the pandemic, but because it's something that many of the children that we work with have experienced or are experiencing. Same thing for the staff that we employ. A lot of times we are lucky enough to get staff that are very caring very, very dedicated, and then we find out that there could be a history of trauma that they're experiencing, and that could be something that you would be handling if you're a supervisor. There will be some difficult topics that we're going to be talking about today. So I always like to mention that, because it could be something hard to hear. It could be something that's going to, bring some feelings to the surface, and you're going to want to make sure you're practicing self-care. So if we dive into something that you're not feeling comfortable with, it's okay to leave and come back, or, be done with the training, because I want everybody to get something out of it, but I mostly want you to be okay while we're talking about it. As Scott said, I am the director here at at Seneca Babcock for the early childhood programs here in Buffalo. I have over 25 years experience. That sounds better than a quarter of a century. I've worked for for-profits, I've worked for not-for-profits, I've worked for Head Start. So back home in Corning, I worked for ProAction Head Start for a long time there, and even school-age programs. But as Scott said, I have spent several years working with children recovering from trauma, so kids with extremely challenging behaviors. So we would welcome multiple children into our programs that may be biting, spitting, hitting, swearing, all of those things. And we use a therapeutic approach to really help them and their families be successful in the classroom. And at the same time, we were supporting our staff to make sure that they were okay as well. As you can see by our objectives, we have quite a lot to cover. So one of the things I would like to say is that any one of these topics could easily be a full-day workshop. We could literally spend days and days together on any one of these topics. But today we have 45 minutes. So I am going to go over things very quickly. But what I did was, at the very end of the PowerPoint, I supplied different links. So if there's something that strikes your interest, there's going to be some starting points where you can dig deeper. I wish we had all the time in the world to go through everything and answer all your questions, but we're going to try to hit a lot, and I definitely want you to walk away with a better understanding, and I also want you to have some tools that you'll be able to use right away. Okay, so we're going to jump right in and talk about trauma. So understanding trauma is really a mindset. So when you understand trauma, it's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about changing the way you view the world. And it really is a change from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. And a lot of people can talk about that, but it's not always something people understand. I have been doing trauma-informed supervision for several years. So many times I will interview staff, and they'll come to me and they're very rough around the edges sometimes, as people would say. And I see a diamond. I see a staff that I know has amazing potential and is going to be absolutely wonderful for children. But that's because I'm looking and thinking, well, what happened, and how do I support this staff? I had a staff member that I hired a few years ago, and she's very distant, very guarded, wonderful with children, really struggled with adults as far as really communicating and talking, and it was hard. And we'd worked together for several years, and as I said, I used trauma-informed supervision. And she came to me one day, and this was before COVID-19, and said to me, you know, Kim, I think that if something were to happen to me, you would come to my funeral. And while that may seem like, wow, that's such a strange thing for somebody to say, and why would she say that to me? I knew that that was really a test in our relationship. She was dipping her toe in to see where we were with our relationship and if we had built trust. And I looked at her and I said, you know, I think we're past that. I really think that if you broke down somewhere in the middle of the night, I would come pick you up and I would make sure you got home safely. And she was so taken back by that, but so happy, because again, it's really that mindset of understanding where people come to you and what their experiences are. So let's look at the definition of trauma, okay? So trauma is just the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved with that experience. So it is overwhelming. So you think about COVID-19, there is no way to prepare for that. It is completely out of our control. It's here and it's happened to us. And that's with many different traumas. So it could be a result of a single accident. You could witness an act of violence. So here sometimes our kids see drive-bys. That's really scary. It could be a car accident. You could be the victim of a crime or somebody you know. And of course, the natural disaster of the pandemic. And these are all called acute traumas. These are those one single time incidents that happen and they happen to us. There's also complex trauma, which we're not really going to get into today, but I wanted to bring that up because it is important. Complex trauma is something that happens over time. So you could, a child could be being sexually abused for years. So that would be a complex trauma that happened over years. They could be witnessing domestic violence over years. They could be living in poverty. And poverty is absolutely a complex trauma, especially when you think of the financial difficulties. Maybe children don't know when they're going to eat again or what kind of stress is going to be at home. And that makes things a little bit more complicated, especially when you're talking about an acute trauma such as the COVID-19. Okay. And the other thing that's really unique about what's happening with us right now is this is a collective trauma. So this is something that the entire world is experiencing at the same time. So it's in real time and it's vicariously. So if you think about our introduction to COVID-19, we were here in the United States looking on to China and watching that happen, and then into Europe. And then for me, when it was hitting Italy and I was really hearing those stories, those live stories from people, and even though it hadn't really come to Buffalo yet, there were a lot of emotions. So vicariously, I was experiencing this trauma at the same time. So in my lifetime, another kind of collective trauma might be 9/11. So these kind of collective traumas, you can say to somebody, where were you on 9/11? And for many people, they can tell you exactly what they were doing, who they were with, and what their experience was during that collective trauma. Here in Buffalo, we have Snowvember, when I think we were under like 1 million feet of snow and nobody could go out of their houses. But that was, again, a collective trauma. And that's what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. And again, so a lot of us, it's very common, unfortunately, for us to have experienced some sort of trauma in the past, or somebody we know has experienced the trauma in the past. And COVID-19 might bring up those feelings. So it's going to re-trigger people. And I work a lot of times on trying to identify my own triggers, and I work with that with my staff so we can kind of practice when we're feeling okay. But again, this is one of those things that came right out of the blue. So with the COVID-19, you might have memories that popped up that you might not have thought about for a while. You might be experiencing difficulty with sleep, feeling on guard, difficult emotions, feeling numb is really common, avoidance, and negative thoughts. And again, like I said, if you can kind of reflect and see those things, those feelings are very familiar. A lot of times trauma comes back as a reaction, not necessarily a memory. So we might be short and we might not understand why, and it's always a feeling or a reaction, and it could be the re-triggering of something. So we're gonna jump right into kids, okay? And I talk a lot about trauma with kids, and I think it's really important that we understand that many of our kids come to our programs, and it doesn't really matter where you work, with a history of trauma. And I always feel like it's our job to make sure that we are interacting with children in a way that we remember. We don't know their stories. We don't know what happened to them all the time. So they could have had an early loss of caregivers, an emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. They could be witnessing domestic violence. They could have various forms of neglect. There could have been a medical or surgical procedure, serious accident. They could be experiencing this pandemic as we are together. So seeing people in face masks, seeing people practicing social distancing and kind of being afraid of children, and they see that reaction in missing loved ones. And then of course, poverty. And I just want to say, I had, this really hit home for me one morning. I was at work and a mom came to me, and she's just lovely. And she said very calmly that after she dropped her kids off to their classroom, she said to me, well, just so you know, last night we came home and we found our neighbor was murdered. And the children had discovered this terrible, terrible scene. And she's like, I just want you to know that this happened because I don't know how they're going to be, but I wanted them to have something normal today. So we decided to come to school. And of course, you know, we got our professionals together and we made a plan. But what was really significant, obviously outside of this terrible event that had happened, is that mom happened to tell us the children were acting just as normal as they normally would. They were playing and interacting. They would not have disclosed that to us. So because we had that disclosure, we could take that extra patience and we could have that extra kindness. But it's so important. We never know what's in a kid's backpack. We don't know what they come to school with. We just happened to find out that time. And how many other times did we not know? So this quote and this amazing little boy Sometimes real superheroes live in the hearts of small children fighting big battles. So we kind of almost always have to assume that there could be a story that we don't know, and we want to make sure that we're interacting with kindness and thoughtfulness and caring. So what does trauma look like to a child who's in survival mode? They might have a far off look. So they might look like they're daydreaming, they might look distant, they might look like they're not engaged. They could get real stiff and have clenched hands or a stiff body. They could be irritable. So I've had families call me recently saying, you know, my child is so cranky, I don't even know who they are. Well, that's really common. They're in survival mode, so they might be a little bit cranky, right? There could be a change in sleep pattern. So I've had some families say to me, you know, she's been up several times in the night, or she doesn't want to get up in the morning. Again, these are all coping skills, and they're in survival mode of what's happening to them. They could have rapid breathing. So you'll see that huffy kind of breathing. And I always try to tell providers or anybody working with children, if you can practice those breathing skills, and I actually provided that at the end, these breathing stars, but you can have even children hold their belly and breathe out and breathe in so they can feel the rise and fall of their own stomachs. Sometimes that helps calm them down a little bit, but you could see that in a child who's in survival mode. They might want to run out of the classroom. They might cry. They might be clinging on a little bit more. I mean, there is nothing safer than being in the arms of somebody you trust and you care about. So they might need those extra hugs right now. And especially with social distancing, they might be getting them less and less. They might not be seeing their grandparents that give them hugs all the time, or that neighbor that you know, is like family. Language meant to be shocking. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because a lot of adults are really shocked by swearing, and it's a trigger for a lot of adults. They hear a child say certain words, and it's really shocking. So you're going to kind of want to think about that, and remember that this is attention. It could be negative attention, but it's still attention. So how are you going to react to that? And you can say things like, you know, I hear that you're angry. You know, let's talk about that. Or you can plan ignore. And then when they're talking to you, really overpraise for the language that they are using. But it is absolutely meant to shock, and it works a lot. And then this one is interesting to me, processing the events around them through play. So a lot of times you'll see kids have events that happened at home, and they'll bring it into your dramatic play. I remember when I was working at a Head Start, one of the kids turned the lights off and then yelled at their friend because they didn't pay the electric bill, right? So right now, kids are coming in the door, and we're checking their temperatures, and their parents are staying at the door, and they're talking and they're hearing about things. So you could see kids taking temperatures of their friends or of their babies. They could be acting out coughing and being sick and things like that. But that's them processing all the things that are happening around them and kind of making sense of it. So you could see those kind of things for a kid in survival mode. This is what is so amazing to me. The brain is just really special. So neural connections are pathways in the brain formed by life experience. And just like a trail, when you're hiking, it becomes more beaten down the more times it's traveled. Repeated trauma can reinforce these pathways, so that feeling, that reaction, those coping skills, it's gonna be something that's almost habit forming and all the time. But the good news is, and this is where really caregivers and providers come in, which I think is so important, you can forge new pathways. So we can harness this phenomenon called neuroplasticity to help new and better neural pathways in their brains that give them the chance to identify, support, and practice coping skills. So our relationships with children, they matter so much because we can teach them coping skills. We can teach them how to be successful in the classroom, problem solve, self-regulate, based on relationships and based on how we purposely interact with them. But that requires people being present, and it is not easy. It is very, very difficult when you have a child who's in survival mode and they're calling you names and possibly hitting and spitting, to really start every moment fresh and realize that what happened to them. So what can we do in our classrooms? So we can create trauma-sensitive classrooms. So we can recognize that these traumatic events are happening. So we can all understand that kids are seeing adults and caregivers in masks, and it could be traumatic to them, and that there's a real panic in the world and they're not going out, they're staying home more, all these things. We can really talk about that, and we can understand that that's happening. We can provide flexible environments that provide universal supports. I always like to say there should be more yeses than nos. So even the little girl down there in the swimsuit spraying the hose, there's a lot of people that be like, oh no, she's not spraying the hose. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen? So for us, we set up a yes. She could spray the hose, and it was really super fun. Be sensitive to the needs of individual children. You know, if you know that Johnny needs you more and you're his person, then, you know, sit by him at lunch, hold his hand, give him extra, because that's what he needs from you right now to feel safe and feel secure during a really scary time. This one's really important. Seeing behaviors as challenging, not the children. And I'll give you an example of something that I've heard my whole career is a child who is biting. I will hear people say, oh, well, they are a biter. So that's really identifying the child and the behavior. Instead, it's really a child who bites, and that's really separating that challenging behavior out. So trying to make sure that they are still the child and the behaviors are what's challenging. Healthy adult relationships. So it's very important in your teams that you're talking to each other, that there's consistent language that's happening between you, that even, I don't care if you don't like each other, but in front of the children, healthy adult relationships, it's also curriculum. And having healthy adult relationships with families. I think it's very powerful when children see caregivers and parents interacting in conversations and problem solving and celebrating things together. And it provides that unity. We want to have that same language. We want to be doing the same things at school and at home. And we want to work to not re-traumatize anybody. So those behaviors can be really frustrating. So it's important that we're checking ourselves and making sure that, you know, we're in check and that we have a plan of how we're going to react to those behaviors, because we don't want to get mad at them. We don't want to yell at them. We don't want to do those kind of things. We want to have a calm, planned response always. Right now with families, they're seeing these behaviors for children, and sometimes they're at home and they're seeing them. And it's really important that we're letting families know, for right now, it's kind of normal for your child to be cranky. It's kind of normal for your child to be clinging on. It's normal right now because we're all coping with COVID-19, and kids are too. So it's all about relationships. We want to find and acknowledge strengths, and your reaction matters. And these are really hard things to do sometimes. So what does the child do well? Think about, and sometimes that's really hard, right? If you're having a child who is having a lot of behaviors and you're like, I just don't think there's anything that's going great. Think about, what does that child do well? Did they walk into the classroom and did they hang up their coat? That's a start. So notice the good, even if it's a small step. That's really important. If you focus on that good, you're going to see it more often. If you're focused on some of the challenging behaviors, you're going to see that more often because you're going to notice it. So really take a step back, and sometimes that's important to do even as a team. And if you're a director reviewing with the staff, it's really easy to forget where you've come. You know, when a child started at point A and now you're at point B, it's nice to review those positive steps to say, you know what, there's real progress being made. Have clear and consistent responses to behavior. So talking to your team and making sure it's very uniform. Be there, dependability matters. Hold high expectations that focus on positive behaviors. So again, if you're looking for those positive things and you're expecting that this child can accomplish this, they're going to eventually get there, and that's going to be because you believed in them. Practice, practice, practice self-talk with children. And don't do it when they're having a meltdown. Do it all day. When you're practicing your breathing, you can say, you know, sometimes when you get upset, you know how to calm yourself down. Remember, we put our hand on our stomach and we practice breathing. You know how to do that. And I am safe. I'm at school. I'm with my friends. I'm with my teachers, people I know. I'm safe. And again, practicing all those things before the child is having a behavior. Practice those breathing techniques. I say that a lot. And then the one-on-one playtime. I think this is really important. And sometimes people will say to me, well, I don't have time to do that. I'm literally talking about 5 to 10 minutes once or twice a week. We used to call it special playtime where I was before, but setting a time aside, and we would have a special bag, and the child and the teacher would go into a room and they would do child-led play just for 5 or 10 minutes. And especially for those kids that are really exhibiting behaviors, people might come and they might say, well, they don't deserve that. It doesn't matter. They need it. if they're exhibiting those behaviors, that means they need it. So please just take 5 or 10 minutes, work with your director and schedule those times. And if you're a director, suggest that with a teacher and support them, and get a bag of toys that are really unique. And again, like I said, child-led play. Let the child lead what the fun is going to be. So we're winding down with kids. And I just want to talk some things that you can do for your kids at home. So right now in my program, we have about 20% of our population still attending, and we have a lot of kids at home. And here's a lot of different ideas. Some of them may work, some of them may not work. It's going to be really individual for what your program can do. Use social media. Teachers can record videos and bring the classroom to them. So we started every day at 11 o'clock on our Facebook page. We have a teacher who does an activity, and it could be yoga, it could be singing, it could be a book, whatever it is. And at 11 o'clock, families know they can tune in and they can see one of our teachers, and we change it up so all the rooms are highlighted. And what we found out from one of our families, this one little girl, she has little figurines and she lines them up in front of her screen, and they're all named. And some of them are her friends and some of them are named to us. And when the Facebook video comes up and she sees who it is, she grabs that figurine and she holds it and she watches the show, and then she acts out what happened, what we did with her that day. She acts it out with all her figurines. And the mom said it is one of the most important moments of the day. And they rewatch those videos just so they can be connected back with their friends in their classroom because they miss you. You could do phone or text check-ins. Some people are Zooming with their kids. You could send them mail. Somebody just sent me, somebody had a really great idea, and they took a picture of themselves as a teacher and they shrunk it down to like this 2 little inch thing, and they mailed it out with a note to their children, kind of like a flat Stanley kind of thing. And that way every child had their teacher at home with them, which I thought was really cute. Listen to your families and meet them where they're at. So some families are thirsty for activities. They want you to send them links to art, and they want to know what books they can read on emotional, literacy, and they want to do all this. And some families are begging you, please don't send me anything else. I just can't handle anything else. And that's okay too. So just really listen to your families. Don't push them too hard. Just meet them where they're at. And support families, helping them know how to talk to children about what's happening with the social distancing and the face masks. And kids are missing their loved ones. They're missing their nanas and their papas and their neighbors and their friends, and they're missing their teachers. So it's really important to acknowledge that. So I know that was quick, but we're gonna start going into adult trauma. And I know that was fast. And like I said, we could go on and on about that. And I have so much information, but that's a taste of trauma with kids. And so hopefully you've got some ideas. So recognizing stress in yourself and other adults. And this is really hard. So I have been working with trauma for several years. And even I have to take a step back and think, oh, I am feeling a certain way, and really recognizing in myself some of the coping skills that I'm using to get through this COVID-19, because of course I'm scared too. So people could be experiencing fear and worry. There could be changes in sleep patterns. So one of the things I noticed was it didn't matter what time I went to bed, I was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I would be up for a couple hours and I'd fall back to sleep around 5. And I called it my second sleep, just kind of like Lord of the Rings kind of thing. And that's a definite change in my sleep pattern. Changing in eating patterns. I don't know if potato chips have ever tasted so delicious as they do right now, but I also know that that's my reaction to trauma. So all of a sudden I am grocery shopping and I'm buying things I would not ever eat. I don't eat chips. I don't eat sweets very often. I like all those things. I just don't do that very often. And all of a sudden I've given myself permission, all of my healthy eating habits out the window, and I'm bringing home popcorn. So changing in eating patterns. There could be some worsening in health problems, worsening of some mental health issues and struggles. Your anxiety could be really, really high. Some people might see an increase in alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, even caffeine, really taking in caffeine more. Forgetfulness. I can tell you, I can be in the middle of a sentence and I can forget what I was talking to you about. It is your brain is processing so much information and there's so much happening. It's easy for that to be one of the symptoms that you can recognize. Changing communication. So again, I use myself as an example. At the beginning of this, of course I was afraid and I was worried and all these things were happening. And I kind of was like noticing changes in communication with people that I was talking to. And again, I was thinking, all right, we're going through this collective trauma together. I do expect there to be change in communication. Well, my daughter and I decide that we're going to go to the coffee shop and we are going to buy gift cards for our garbage collectors because they are just doing this amazing job and they do it every week for us. And I just know it's been a lot because a lot of people have been cleaning. So I'm in line in my car, I'm going through the drive-through and I get to the place where I'm going to drive to order, but I stopped short a little bit because I wanted to look at the menu because I was going to get my daughter something too. And I was stopped literally for 2 seconds and it was not busy, I promise. And the lady behind me beeps. Well, normally this stuff doesn't bother me. I kind of laugh because these things happen to me all the time. But this time I got really mad and I'm like, what is wrong with her? And my fists are clenched and I'm breathing heavy. And I'm like, oh my God, she is a Jerk. I can't believe it. Right. And I'm doing this all in front of my adult daughter who is like right there with me. We're like, I don't know who we are, right? This change in communication. Of course, by the time I got to the window, I felt terrible and I bought her order because I don't want to be that person. And I kind of recognize that in myself. But again, that change in communication, not only for yourself, are you seeing that and are you experiencing that with other people? And then of course, grief. There is incredible sadness that's happening right now with COVID-19, both through experiences that you're having and also through people, the stories that you're hearing from the front lines, which are just tragic. So how can we support families? And there's, like I said, there are so many activities, there are so many things that we can do. So we can provide activity bags. We're so lucky here in Buffalo, we have a partnership with Early Head Start, and they provided activity bags for all of our families. So they did not have to worry about financially how they were going to afford to do that or come up with ideas. They got them. They got paper, crayons, and lots of activities. You could do, again, Zoom checking in. You can call and text. Be prepared to have resources for families. So if families are struggling, where is the local food bank? What is the number for domestic violence, for child abuse, things like that, or even how they can get help outside of the home. So be ready for that if you know your families, and you're gonna offer that linkage. Settle for less academics. Sometimes families, not only do they have preschoolers and infants and toddlers at home, but they also have school agers, and it's really challenging. I've done some of the math that my daughter's doing, and I don't know how to do it. And I have a degree in education, and I'm still struggling with that. And it can be very overwhelming for families. So sometimes less academics, if they need to do that, it's okay. We need to get through this first and be okay. Get back to basics. Find a few minutes to be you. Remind families it's okay for them to have a few minutes just to be you and to relax and take a bath if they can find the time. Talk to them about scheduling FaceTime with loved ones and how can they do that, or people that they care about and friends, because we don't want them to be disconnected. We want them to be connected. And offer information for them on how to talk to their kids. And again, I included those links at the end of this. So if you're looking for support, you can hand that off to the families. But what we need to acknowledge as providers and people who are interacting with families, that this is really hard and scary for our families. They don't do our jobs. We're trained to do these jobs. We get, some of us have invested in our education. Some of us have 25 years experience, but we're trained to do this. And they don't always have that training. So it's hard and scary. They feel guilty about screen time. So I was talking to a therapist this weekend, trying to get some ideas of how she's working with families right now, because that's her job. And I'm like, what do you think? What are suggestions? And she said to me, one of the biggest things she's hearing from families is that families feel guilty about their children using screens. So they're watching TV, they're playing games. And this has been a topic that I've been talking about a little bit more recently, that there's almost like this collective shaming of parents and technology. And this was before COVID-19. So we would see a mom in the grocery store and the child would have her iPhone, or we would see a dad reading his tablet and not paying attention to the child. And people made that snapshot judgment and said, wow, they should be paying attention to their kids. And there was a lot of judgment. And I want to tell you, when my kids were growing up, I didn't have iPhones and things like that, but I can honestly say I might have used something like that to grocery shop with both of my hands, right? And then be able to have a really nice interactive dinner at home later versus just trying to get through it. So I just feel like I think our families need us to not judge and just be supportive. And they might be using screens a little bit more than they're comfortable with, but right now, again, it's really hard and it's really scary and they're on survival mode. And small accomplishments are still accomplishments. So we're hearing on social media, oh my gosh, people are painting their entire houses. They've started new hobbies. They're building these crazy things. And it's hard when you're that family and you got your pants on today. And then you feel really good about that. And that's okay. That's a small accomplishment. The more we focus on those small victories for families, the more they're going to feel confident to have more of those. And they're going to start feeling better, and we're going to be able to build them up. So they are coping the best that they can. So for our employees, right? So these are the adults that we're dealing with. And some of them are home and some of them are here with us working every single day. If they're here, it doesn't matter where they are, but I know for our staff, they're afraid they're going to get the virus. They're worried that they're going to bring it home to their families. I know I'm always afraid of that. They're experiencing isolation and loss. So for us here, our team is a fraction of what it was, and we really miss our teammates. We have a lot of fun here at work, and we're missing each other. They are experiencing that acute trauma that we talked about. There's feelings of anxiety, feeling overwhelmed. They're also dealing with the stigma. People are afraid to be around them because they know that they're interacting with the public. And especially, I feel like for early childhood, because we're interacting with children. And children can sometimes be carriers and maybe not have the symptoms the same way that adults do. And that's not for everybody, but sometimes there's that stigma and people are nervous to be around you. So they're afraid of the unknown, and they might even feel a little bit of resentment because some people are at home and they're collecting unemployment and they're safe and they're with their families and they're here and they're doing this really, really important work, but it could bring up feelings for them for sure. So what we may experience, we could be irritable, difficult concentrating, avoiding behaviors, numbness, and we talked about that. And you might see that from your staff. Anxiety and worry. Depression is something that we really have to look at, and low self-esteem. So they might feel hopelessness. Again, that changes in sleep, changes in appetite. Insomnia. They might not be able to fall asleep at night, and they're really struggling. So they might be coming to work on less sleep. Substance abuse in an attempt to self-medicate, forgetfulness, and again, that vicarious trauma. Seeing what's happening, families are going to be telling them stories, and it could be overwhelming for them. So they're going to be very empathetic to those families and those experiences. And grief and loss, and I just want to talk a little bit about this. Obviously, there are just terrible things that are happening because of this COVID-19, and there's death and there's sickness and there's isolation, and we miss our loved ones, and we're worried that we could get them sick, right? But there's also the grief of losing all your plans that you had this summer. I literally was calling this summer the summer of my life. I had concerts lined up. I had dates with my daughters. I work a summer job where I get to see some very special friends, and I really wanted to be a part of that, but I'm not going to be able to do that. And that's real grief, and that happens. So people are experiencing that for sure. And I'm going to jump into, in our last little bit together, talking about trauma-informed supervision. And this is very different. So traditionally, a lot of times people in management, or if you've been managed, there's a person that's telling you what to do and then you do the job. They tell you how to do it and that's what you do. And there's that kind of that relationship. With trauma-informed supervision, it's different than that. It's relationship-based. So all these things that we've been talking about with relationships, it's going to apply for your staff, and that could be uncomfortable. And that's why this quote just hits home for me. You can choose courage or you can choose comfort, and you cannot have both. And what I mean by that is it's really comfortable to be in a management style that you've always experienced or that you've always practiced or that you've always been a part of. But it takes courage to think outside that box and think, you know what, I'm going to move into a more collaborative back and forth with my staff, and it's going to be relationship based. I'm going to get to know my staff in a different way. You don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. So we can be very supportive to staff. And like I said, it would be, trauma-informed supervision. it's really about creating safe spaces. So educators need support. They're at risk of vicarious trauma. And what I find is that when I'm offering that kind of supervision, it enhances the commitment of the staff to the work that they do. We talk a lot about what our job is. I know we have a mission here at Seneca Babcock of what we want to do for this community, and I talk a lot about it, and my staff talk to me about it. And the end goal, there's a lot of different ways to get there, and they help me decide together what we're going to do. And it also builds strength and competency. So they're going to know their job because they're going to be invested in the decisions that are happening. And this picture is just a little coffee bar that I set up for the staff. I like to surprise them with little things because I think about them, and I want to make their day great because they're amazing at what they do. So trauma-informed supervision, like I said, it is about relationships. So we want to create safe environments. They want to know. We need to feel like we care about each other. That means that there has to be clear expectations. There shouldn't be any secrecy or questioning. And everyone agrees to self-regulate. So including people that are administrators, if there's a back and forth, sometimes they could say things to you that is feedback for you that could be difficult to hear, but we all self-regulate. We don't get mad. We don't lash out. We don't punish. Sometimes if staff come to me and they say something to me that I hadn't thought about, and maybe I have a feeling about, I look at them and I say, you know what? I have to sleep on this. I'm an overnighter. I need to think about this a little bit more so I can process that. But that's safe, and they know what to expect from me. Collaboration, we work together, we share ideas. Trust. You build trust through regular interactions. So really making sure that you're setting up times for you and the staff to really talk and ask how they're doing, and they're going to ask you how you're doing, and it's a back and forth, but you build that trust by doing what you say. Again, there should be consistent boundaries. So there could be things that are, off limits. We're not going to hurt each other's feelings. We're going to always use respectful communication. You can set up those boundaries, but again, those are things that everybody agrees with. Peer support, again, it's about not gossiping and not judging, and really making sure that there's a mutual respect with each other and your coworkers. So we work a lot on problem solving and conflict resolution. If a staff member comes to me with a concern, I practice with them on how they are going to address it with their team. And obviously if they need more support, we do that too. Choice and control, understanding that everybody has responsibilities, and we kind of are very respectful of that. I have a job to do, they have a job to do, and we understand and we respect that. And it actually works out really nice. We're going to move beyond cultural and historical and gender stereotypes. I'm very lucky. I have a very diverse staff, and we're just really grateful that we all can appreciate one another. And of course, empowerment. So this takes regular observation on your part to make sure that you're in the classroom so you can give specific information. And sometimes when I'm giving feedback to staff, and sometimes it might be something that's going to help them grow, I literally say to them, I tell you this because I believe in who you are as a professional. I want you to be the best that you can be. And I feel like when they give me feedback, that is also what they're doing for me. They want me to be the best professional that I can be and be best at my job. So as supervisors, we need to make basic assumptions. Staff are doing the best that they can. The symptoms that you see, sometimes they're coping skills, and staff are watching, so walk the walk. And I think this is really important, and I really like this quote. Each of us, famous or infamous, is a role model for somebody, and if we aren't, we should behave as though we are. Cheerful, kind, loving, courteous, because you can be sure someone is watching and taking deliberate and diligent notes. Being kind, cheerful, loving, and courteous, I think that's something that all of our staff and we deserve in return. So how can we be responsive, trauma responsive to our staff? It's all about building relationships. Communicate, 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 and communicate more. You cannot over communicate. I tell my staff, if I've told you this 3 times, I just want to make sure you hear the information because it's better than not hearing it at all. And update, especially right now with COVID-19, they're in the classrooms and they don't know what's happening, and that's really scary. So I go in and I update them on everything. And I always say, all right, so here's the plan. And we know right now that any plan we make could change in 5 minutes. And I say that too. This is the plan, but that could change based on what happens next. But I'll be back and I'll let you know. And I do. I always follow up on my promises. Use inclusive speech. This is our team. We are in this together. We worked hard. Sometimes people will come up to me and they'll say, wow, you've done a great job. And I'll be like, this team makes me look great. It is really a collective effort. So it's we and our. And think about your role of feedback, making standards clear, providing that supportive environment, and believe your staff can grow and change. And I say that to them, and I will point that out, and I really pay attention, and I make sure that I see that when they've accomplished something that they've been working really hard at. I want to notice that. So, other ideas to build relationships with your teams. Ask them how they want to communicate and do that. So if I have a tidbit of information and I want to get it out to my staff, I use email, I text, and I use our Facebook page. We have a private Facebook page because that's what they told me. That's what they asked of me. So that's what I do. I follow up on my promises. Our teachers group has a private Facebook page with very specific guidelines. So we have a private Facebook page. Nobody else can get on it unless you're an active teacher or support staff in our building. And it always has to be positive. You can ask questions and you can gather information. And we do a lot on that Facebook page. So people really tune in and it's a lot of fun. And one of the things I did recently with the COVID-19, because we laid off a lot of our staff, we set up, we have our Facebook page and then we have an event tab underneath our Facebook page. And that event tab is unemployment. So if you're filing for unemployment or you're struggling with that, you can go not only to our Facebook page, but then you can click that event tab and everybody's on there. And we're constantly, every time I read something, I update it with tips. Other staff are updating their experiences so we can make sure that that's very current. Set up Zoom nights. We did a sip and paint, which was really, really fun. We're getting ready next week to do a homebound bingo where the bingo board is covered with different phrases. And when we zoom in, if you can get somebody to say whatever phrases on your bingo board, you get to cross that out. So that's really fun. I had a director friend who told me she does 2-minute daily check-ins. So every day for her staff that are currently here, she brings them to the office for 2 minutes and say, how are you feeling? And good is not a feeling. How are you coping? What are you doing? Remind them of their why, offer ideas on self-care. And I just want to remind everybody that next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And I'm sure that they're going to want to hear from you. So here's just some pictures of some things we did. We had our Zoom chat night. These were doors that we decorated. What's your superpower? Mr. Rogers, we had a red cardigan day. My daughter is featured in the mask. She made these and gave them out to our staff and our families. Pajama day. This bottom one with that cute little boy, that's my grandson and one of our staff. We had on our Facebook page a selfie challenge, and so you could post a picture just for our private Facebook page, somebody else could see it and say why, and that was really fun. And then in the bottom corner right now, this is our current challenge that we're doing on Facebook. Everybody is posting pictures of when they were kids, and this is our program assistant Julie, and I want to tell you, she never smiles at me like that, so it's really nice to have that picture of her smiling at me. So self-care for you and your team, take breaks from the news. Make sure you're getting really good information, and you don't need to watch everything every single day. I had to do that and really just digest what I could. Deep breathing and stretches. Eat healthy. So last week I stopped buying the chips and I went back to some of my habits, and I already do feel a little bit better. Exercise, which everybody says, I walk around the block with my dog. My dog is really happy that I'm giving her all this attention, and we take just a quick walk around the block, and that really helps. I'm careful of my intake of alcohol and caffeine. For some people, they write down their fears. When they write it down, they're able to look at that, break it down, and really be able to come up with strategies of how they're gonna conquer them. Stay connected, so reach out and call. I have to call my sister, and make sure I check in with her and make sure she's okay. Be hopeful. Review what you're grateful for, even if it's small. I am able to be in my home today. I cooked dinner for myself. Be hopeful. Realize what you have control over, even if it's something small. I can pick what outfit I'm going to wear today, what lipstick I'm going to wear. Those are things I have control over. Be kind to yourself. And I want to give you this tip. I just found out that you can schedule your Alexa on an app on your phone and create routines, right? So what I learned is you can have her give you a compliment every morning. So every morning I wake up and she kind of gives me the events of the day, and she tells me different things that are happening, and then she compliments me. So this morning I found out, number one, it's National Superhero Month, which I thought was very fitting for the group of people that we were talking with. And number two, she complimented me. And what she said was, you are good enough, you are smart enough, and doggone it, people like you. And some of you know what that's referencing, and it just made me so happy this morning. So be kind to yourself. And even if you need Alexa to remind you, I suggest that. Make time for fun. So I was so overwhelmed with all the news that was happening and all the stories that I needed to really purposely do that. So what I did was I went to my number one, I watch junk TV, and I went right to Monk. And if you've never watched it, it's amazing. And every night I watch one episode of Monk, and I really do look forward to that. And it may seem small, but it's something I can do. And now I can't wait to get home and do that. And if anybody is overwhelmed with emotions, encourage them or yourself to contact their primary care physician, because we don't want anybody feeling like there's not resources and there's not help for them. Okay, so that is it for me. And I'm ready for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. I don't know if you're checking the chat, but people are loving this, and they're loving all the ideas that you shared about ways.
I was just about to say, Genevieve, like one of the, I think what you said about encouraging other people on this call have been so inspiring. And as somebody just said, awesome sauce, which is so great. But no, the love felt for what's being said. People needed this. And many people have asked, can they take this slide deck to their staff? And I think the answer is absolutely. We'll distribute that tomorrow. But yeah, so let's get started with a couple of questions here. So we need more strategies, ideas to deal with infants and toddlers at home with families who still work from home. There's not so much at all out there for this age group. And I can say this, every single one of our conference calls is celebrated because we have cute babies on them. But not everybody's work environment might be as infant friendly. But any thoughts there, Kim?
Well, one of the things that we do here at Seneca Babcock, our claim to fame kind of is really working with mental health for infants and toddlers. So we do a lot. I highly, highly recommend Pyramid Model. There's a lot of strategies there. And they also have PWI, which is Parents Interacting with Infants. And so all of us here are trained on that. There's so many strategies in that model that I did include that on the links. So I would highly recommend clicking on that link. You can get a lot of information there. But babies, right now we're finding they really need to be held, and that's good. They need that skin to skin because of the social distancing. We want to do that. And the same thing with toddlers. So yeah, so I would highly recommend Pyramid Model.
And one of the underlying themes, I'd love to hear your opinion, is on employees that have pre-existing conditions or comorbidities. So what is your opinion of letting those employees go on short-term disability? Is this legally allowed? Any thoughts on that from a legal perspective? I know myself, we're having very open conversations at Kangaroo Time about things like, do you have asthma? Do we need to make any extra accommodations? Are there things? I think, this concept of being private and HIPAA, I think the rules have changed, right? Any thoughts there, Kim?
Yeah, again, if you're going to that trauma-informed supervision, there are a lot of relationship-based things that you have with your staff. So you might already know some of these pre-existing conditions. So I can't speak to what everybody should do. I can tell you what I did here was when we were making the decisions of who was going to be laid off, I talked to everybody. And we had private conversations one-on-one, and I let them know, these are the things that I'm concerned about. At the end, it was their decision if they wanted to be recommended for layoff or if they wanted to be recommended to stay. And I really weighed that heavily. So again, I think it's that relationship with your staff, and I need to sleep at night. So I am going to support decisions that are good for them.
Awesome. Okay, so hey, Christina, great question. She says, thank you for the webinar. Do you have any ideas for Teacher Appreciation Week for schools that are like completely remote? And I'll throw something in there. One of our employees just had their 5-year-old's birthday party, and they had the police drive by and flash sirens. I don't know if we can go that grand with everybody. Call your local authorities, maybe the fire department, see if we can't have them do the rounds. But any thoughts, any gift delivery ideas for Teacher Appreciation Week?
I had the most amazing Teacher Appreciation Week planned, and then COVID-19 happened, right? So here we are scrambling, trying to figure that out. So a couple of things that we're doing, and if I have teachers that are watching, you should not listen. We have called our family, and they are sending me videos, a thank you video to our teachers, and we actually are putting that together, and we're putting that on our Facebook page. And I could easily send that to them through digital means. We also are doing a trivia of the day, and we have electronic gift cards that we're giving out, so they could win those. And of course, like I said before, we're doing our homebound bingo through Zoom. So we've got a night planned where we're going to get together, and of course, there's going to be prizes that way. So that's kind of what we're doing here, hoping that brightens their week and they feel appreciated.
That's amazing. I love it. I'm already thinking about an office parody I need to send our team. We think of our team as teachers as well.
Yeah.
Any quick, so as we close this up, any quick thoughts on, I know you had a slide on stress release and getting exercise, but there was a question that came in on that. Any others, any other practical self-care tips?
Again, this could be a full day workshop, and we talk a lot about self-care. It's more than a bubble bath, but again, it's, if you can sit with yourself for a few minutes and really reflect and kind of identify those feelings that you're having within yourself, and then think about the things that have made you feel good in the past. And sometimes I have a teacher who is an author. He is so talented. He's finishing his book. And he finds that to be very therapeutic right now. I have somebody else who's volunteering at our local food bank because that kind of giving, because we're caregivers, they're doing that. So I think it's a very personal decision of what makes you feel better. And when you have those feelings, that's what you should be doing.
That's great. Also, we had a request. Can we maybe send out some directions for the ultimate game of bingo, or some framework around the bingo?
Absolutely. I made it up. So not that I made up bingo, but I made up this idea. And really the strategy is, if you get your bingo card, you kind of want to guide the conversation so people say these crazy things. And we have stuff on there from Tiger King, of course, The Office, because we're all big Office fans. Just different things, that some inside jokes. But I would be happy to share that because I think it's going to be so fun.
That's awesome. All right, Kim, I think we're at time. I want to thank you for one of the most inspiring webinars I've had the honor to be a part of. I think the timing was just right. I think we all need to be thinking in terms of how to address trauma, how to be stewards to our employees, our teams, and the families that we serve. But thank you so much. And I look forward to doing this again. We should do this again soon.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Genevieve, any closing remarks or any last minute house cleaning before we sign off?
Yes, just so everyone knows, you will receive the recording, all of Kim's resources, and her presentation tomorrow. And we'll see if we can get something about how to conduct the bingo via Zoom as well from her. So stay tuned for an email tomorrow. It'll go out tomorrow by end of day. And then we also have a webinar coming up tomorrow at 2 p.m. That is with Scott and our product manager, David. We'll also send a link to that in the follow-up email. And we have another webinar next week and a roundtable discussion, which is going to be a little bit different. So we'll send all of those links in our email for tomorrow. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves. Be healthy.